This video is now in session, and oil, as well as climate change. These two words are something that are being discussed more and more throughout the 21st century, and we've seen a lot of oil companies have to deal with activism and the push against fossil fuels and the need for more renewable energy. And it's ultimately to get to that point where a lot of oil companies at least accept the problem and actually try to find solutions to this problem. And we're seeing environmentalists go to courts and as well as go to shareholder meetings and try to change oil giants from the inside. And this is a partisan opinion video because we generally support that, because it's really a matter of when oil will be replaced by renewable energies rather than if. For the longest of time at this point, we've seen jobs in the coal industry go down. Ever since the 1980s, the amount of people who engage in fossil fuels has decreased, and the amount of people who have jobs in the renewable sector has increased. So trying to make this industry stay afloat is generally not the right idea. There are a lot of people, a lot of coal miners who rely on oil giants in order to get their paycheck, but we should be helping them transition over to a renewable energy job, because those jobs are generally much more they make much more money than fossil fuel jobs. So trying to provide those kinds of jobs to rural states will help with their economy compared to trying to keep afloat a dying industry. And meanwhile, at the very top of this chain, we have oil giants who are corrupt. Rex Tillerson, you might remember him as being a secretary under Donald Trump's administration. He was an oil tycoon from ExxonMobil. And then there's also many other oil tycoons that work for Chevron, work for Shell, currently work for ExxonMobil, and as well as ConocoPhillips. And that there's a lot of corruption that goes on in the top of the chain. And if you're trying to make all of this system, which is very dilapidated and incredibly flawed, if you're trying to make it stay afloat and if you're trying to propel that industry, then it's time to start reassessing, because this isn't just bad for employers of oil giants. It's also bad for the consumers, because renewable energies have been shown to decrease electricity rates or electricity costs, and with renewable energies, it creates a more competitive market where you can have lower prices of energy, and that will ultimately help with your life. Whether you're from a company, you manage a company, or if you're just a homeowner, you will benefit from renewable energy with energy competitiveness. These are all things that conservatives champion about. Lack of energy dominance. Again, competition, one of the main things, and as well as a conservation of the environment, and that's achieved through renewable energies. So it should seem like both conservatives and liberals would be in support of renewable energy. And around the world, we see in the United Kingdom, both conservatives and the Labour Party support green measures. In France, the same thing. In most European countries, it's the same thing. In Asia, it's becoming a more accepted reality. Yet the United States, we're still stubborn on climate change. We're still stubborn on the idea of expanding the amount of industries that we have, and having the potential to become a leader in a new industry, in wind power, in solar power, in geothermal energy. These are all things that the United States can invest in with great returns. Now, if these industries are emerging and present a big opportunity, some people ask why they're not already being implemented in the United States. Surely there should be some flaws if they're not already implemented. But we have to take a step back and look at the governments and how they've responded to this push for more renewable energy. In the Obama administration, Or actually, let's go even further back than the Obama administration. Let's go all the way to the Carter administration. The Carter administration, in the presidency of Jimmy Carter, he wanted to promote conservation. He wanted to make his constituents, to make Americans be more aware of their carbon output. So as a result, he started champion not policies but rather actions like maybe reducing the amount of air conditioning that you need, or maybe not using the heater as much. And he also installed solar panels on the White House roof. Now, this may seem like a very mild kind of action, and it is mild. It is very mild, but that was in 1976 to 1980. And then from there, Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush started reversing on those policies. They still promoted energy conservation to some point, but they still believed that Americans should not have to feel like they have to regulate their temperature to save the climate. And at the same time, with George H.W. Bush, he comes from Texas. Texas is a very oil heavy state. So he would obviously be a lot more favorable to oil and to fossil fuel giants. And then fast forward to Bill Clinton, he relatively kept the status quo. He was a little bit more moderate on fossil fuels, and generally he didn't focus on energy conservation as much as he did on other things like healthcare or healthcare and the economy. And then we go to George W. Bush. George W. Bush also comes from Texas, so he was very favorable for fossil fuel giants, and he started rolling back a lot of the climate policy that was meant to accelerate renewable energy. So then Obama flip-flop on that, and then and Obama wanted to promote renewable energy. But the thing is with Obama is that he still didn't quite do policies because Congress was at that time, or at least in 2008, he decided to focus on regulation rather than policies. So he started regulating the oil giants, and he didn't really give an alternative to that. And by 2010, the House flipped from Democratic to Republican. So as a result, Obama could not push out any kind of policy. Rather, he could only do regulations, and that made him deeply unpopular with rural Americans, and it made rural Americans feel like they were forgotten, and especially states who single-handedly rely on oil, like West Virginia or the Dakotas or somewhat in Texas and in those kinds of states, a lot in Oklahoma, you see a lot of uprisings against Obama's climate regulation because regulations don't quite solve the transition problem from from fossil fuels over to renewable energy. So we see attorney generals and we see officials that are elected in those states purely because they want to fight against Obama's climate energy and climate regulations. So from there, those Republicans who are for who are for oil companies go to the Supreme Court and argue in favor of oil tycoons, and what the Supreme Court ultimately said was that Obama's clean energy regulations, the carbon plan that he wanted to implement, should be paused and should not go through. And that was a win for fossil fuels. And in addition, another win was the transition from Barack Obama to Donald Trump. Donald Trump got Rex Tillerson and got the Attorney General of Oklahoma, who was very much for oil companies and these big oil giants like Devon Energy. He then got him to be the EPA administrator. So he was at the very top of the Environmental Protection Agency, an agency that was meant to protect the environment. That's its namesake. And here you have an oil tycoon who wants to protect the interests of fossil fuels. And that is where that is what practically Donald Trump did, which was rolled back much of the Obama era climate policies and climate regulations. And now we come to the Biden administration. The Biden administration is trying to take a more policy-oriented approach to climate change rather than a regulation approach, because trying to regulate oil companies is one thing, but there also has to be a transition and jobs in the renewable energy sector, and that comes with policy. That comes with giving more funds for R&D of renewable energy. It means giving contracts out to renewable energy companies to build out solar panels and renewable energies along these rural states. And for Biden, if he really wants to start making this a bipartisan issue, he has to pass renewable energy and market it as a way to improve America, to improve its infrastructure, to improve its industries, to help power America to become to lead in this industry that is creating billions of dollars throughout the entire world and creating a more technological future for the United States. And he should be putting these renewable energy stations in rural America. Like, urban America would certainly benefit it, and placing wind turbines off the coast of New Jersey would certainly help New Jersey in terms of expanding the amount of industries it has. But this really should be going to rural states that currently rely on on big oil companies, because they don't have any other industry to rely on. So if you move renewable energies over to those states, then you can have a dichotomy rather than a monopoly going on in those states. And you can have people who can either choose to be part of the dying oil industry, or you can have people choosing to be part of the renewable energy industry. And that's something that should be given as a choice. In the urban states, you have many choices of different kinds of industries you can go into, but many of those times in rural states, you don't have that kind of opportunity. So moving renewable energy over to those rural states will help fund a transition, and it will benefit them, their economies, so that the government can start spending on infrastructure improvements to rural states. And that's what Biden should be doing, is helping these rural states, even if they are Republican, because oil simply is not going to survive. Many jobs are already going away in oil, and it's about time that America starts to change over to a new emerging industry that can create jobs and that can create money. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to have another video tomorrow talking about Biden and his climate policy in Alaska specifically, because what he's doing in Alaska and what his administration is doing is pretty interesting and contrary to what climate activists want. But that's the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.